Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live from Film Fanatic headquarters. August August 18th. It's Tuesday. Pretty gray and overcast day, but nevertheless, pretty nice day. Hope everyone's doing good. This has been a pretty cool week so far. I just been kind of chilling. I've had this week off. I go start back to school. The school goes back into session another week and a half, which is crazy. So I'm kind of on the summer session just ended. The summer camps, which I which I do or I'm a part of at where I work, and so it goes by so quick. So got some time off, and it's been kind of cool to kind of just chill for a little bit, and it's been a lot of fun. I been watching a lot of movies. Surprise, surprise. Been buying a lot of movies, which has been just absolutely spectacular. So I it was funny because I went three different times to buy some movies. I was coming back from my trip from out of town when I had some out of town quantum shows, and I went to the South Portland Bull Moose, which was amazing. I wish it was closer because it's a really great spot because it's probably the biggest actual store, as far as just the size and the amount of stuff that they have in it. So I went there and I got some killer movies, and I've been reviewing those movies and talking about some of those movies. I think I have one more movie from those purchases to review or to do a video on, and then a week or a little less than a week later, I went to world famous Opera House Video and picked up some more movies, Blu-rays. These were all Blu-rays that I got, which was really cool. They Opera House Videos had this movie sale again, and they got a huge or pretty good, pretty awesome influx of new Blu-ray titles and a bunch of movies that I didn't even know that they had. So they had a pretty awesome sale. So I went there and picked up a bunch of movies. So I've been doing coverage of those videos too. And then last weekend I was down in Brunswick and to do a recording session. And on the way back, I stopped at Bull Moose and got more movies, which is just amazing. And ironically enough, which I didn't go, which I'm kind of glad I didn't. I am and I'm not, but I was actually down in Brunswick again last night to hang out with a friend down there. And Brunswick's a really cool little town. There's a lot of cool little restaurants. Went to a really cool spot last night that I had never heard of, and it's a great little town. And I was tempted to go to Bull Moose, but I was like, no, I can't go. I can't go because it was like three trips. Because I went it as far as movie buying or movie purchases. There was a long like kind of lull or time that I didn't really buy any movies, but the last few weeks I went a little crazy, so I got plenty of movies to watch, and so you know it's can't spend every penny that I have. So really really cool. And speaking of movies, which I'm super super stoked, tonight I am going to go see the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original from 1973. It's gonna, I guess today is a national. I don't know if you want to call it a holiday, but there's a single day showing or screening tonight. One show only at Black Bear Cinema where they're going to show the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So I'm super stoked because I mean, God, a masterpiece, one of the greatest movies ever. You know, one of the greatest slasher movies ever made, one of the greatest horror films ever made, one of the greatest grindhouse exploitation movies ever made. And I think that the impact of that movie is, I mean, talk about seismic. I mean, it's influenced cinema as a whole. So, I've never gotten a chance to see it on the big screen. So I'm really, really excited. And it's crazy because I always forget how actually short the movie is. I mean, because a lot of the times, a lot of movies these days are fairly lengthy, and a lot of people, and I get it. A lot of movies probably are a little too long, but a lot of movies these days are 2 hours plus. There's a even kids movies, like a lot of movies that newer movies that come out are very long. But I always forget that Texas, the original, is only an hour and 23 minutes. It's not even an hour and a half. It's crazy. But I mean, such a masterpiece. I have so many multiple editions of that movie. I have two versions of it on, or two copies of Texas on DVD. I think I haven't seen it in a while, but I thought I had a VHS copy. I have two editions of it on Blu-ray, and then I got a really great version of it a few years ago. So I have about four or five different versions of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I've never seen it on the big screen. So I'm super super stoked. I mean, I imagine it's going to be an entirely different experience, especially like watching it with a group of people because the movie is such a frightening movie and such a disturbing movie. But again, it's one of those movies that has such a crazy reputation for being such a gory, violent movie, especially when it comes to like gore and blood and violence. And it's whenever you actually see the movie, it actually has very little gore. I feel like that movie is just really unhinged insanity. But there's when it comes to the gore and the violence, and especially the gore, it actually has very little gore gore in it. And I feel like the strength of Texas is, well, it's just the grittiness. It's such a dirty, nasty movie. It has it feels like it's a documentary. It just feels like you're really experiencing what's happening because it's just so raw. And also I feel like an experiment with psychological terror. Like I think that the strength of that movie is it's all psychological, and it is such a harrowing experience. And when it comes to the gore, a lot of people think it is a movie that is just blood soaked, and I think it's because of the power of what they show, of what Toby Hooper would show, and what he wouldn't show, and to a degree, maybe even the restraint that he had. You really, it leaves a lot of room for your imagination because there actually isn't a lot of gore in the film, but yet you feel like you are seeing it because of the psychological element, and it's just such a powerful film. And even saying that it's such a powerful film isn't doing it justice because it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, one of the most influential movies, and which became one of the biggest and still is one of the biggest franchises ever. And they're going to be A24 last or this year acquired the rights to the franchise, and there's going to be a series and there's going to be a new movie. So the passion and love for the franchise is bigger probably now than ever. So I'm really curious. I'm really excited. So I will definitely be doing a review or interview and definitely talk about the experience of getting to see this fucking masterpiece on the big screen. So I just, it's a movie too. I have seen so many times. Yeah, it's probably one of the most watched movies I've ever, that I, for me, actually. And so I'll definitely do a show on Texas and, actually getting a chance to see it on the big screen and seeing it with a group of people, which I'm really curious to see what that's going to be like. And Black Bear Cinema is such an awesome movie theater. It really is. I've been there pretty good amount of times, maybe about four times now. It's a little bit of a drive, but I think it's worth it. It's about an hour and 10 minutes away. It's right above Bangor, and Bangor is exactly an hour from here, but totally fucking worth it. I've gone up there to see some incredible movies. I went up there to see the they started this series, and they're still gonna do the series is still happening where they're going to show all of the original Friday the 13th on actual Friday the 13th, and the next one is until November, which is funny. But I've gone up there to see the first time I went there was to see the Christopher Nolan restored, remastered version of 2001: Space Odyssey, Stanley Kubrick. One of the most incredible movie going experiences I've ever had. I mean, incredible. And it was an extended cut too. There was actually some scenes added or extended in the film. And then I went to go see Friday 13th Part 3 in 3D there, which was actually absolutely incredible. My favorite horror franchise, my favorite slasher franchise. And then I saw um, Friday 13th Part 4, the final chapter, my favorite Friday 13th movie. That was absolutely incredible to see that in the big screen. Uh, and then another film I saw, I think it was called Over Your Dead Body, which was like a horror comedy. Really cool movie. Really, I think that's the title. I might have the title wrong. A newer release that I saw this year. Really awesome movie though. Like kind of a black comedy. Um, very violent, very gory. Really good though. Really, really cool. And then another movie I saw, which was an A24 movie. Oh man, what the hell was the name of it? It was okay. It was about this group, or these two people that run this podcast, and it's like a paranormal podcast. I can't remember the name of it, but that movie was okay. But I've had all the experiences that I've had going up there have been spectacular. So I'm really psyched to see this amazing masterpiece. So I'll definitely do a video. And it's funny. I have, again, I've seen Texas so many times. Definitely one of the most watched movies. I just watched it again a couple weeks ago. And I have a real interesting history because I've talked about this before. And growing up as a kid, and in my family, like my parents, kind of let me pretty much watch anything. I was able to like watch any movie, and it was never an issue. And again, I grew up watching horror. My mom's a big fan of the genre, so we used to watch all kinds of movies, all kinds of slasher movies, and but the only two movies I was never allowed to watch because my mom felt she doesn't like either of these movies and the reason is because she feels they're just too real. They're too realistic. And I totally get that because they that is, I think at the end of the day, the strengths of these movies, what makes them such a powerful experience. But the only two movies I was never allowed to watch was Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original, the one I'm going to see tonight, and the original Exorcist. I didn't get to see Texas or the Exorcist until I was in college. Yeah. But I was allowed to watch anything else. So, yeah, it's a real interesting history around it. So, I'll definitely do a show on my whole experience of getting to see this masterpiece on the big screen. So, stay tuned for that, for what it's worth. So, today's movie is on a movie I've actually only seen. I think I've only seen it maybe 2 or 3 times, and I think it's it's such a great movie, and I think it's one of the most. I think it's such a classic '70s film. I think it's one of the great science fiction classics. I really do. I think it's a classic science fiction movie. I think it's really original, and yeah, I think it's a movie that is not talked about enough. It came out my favorite decade, and I saw it. It was interesting too how I discovered this movie, but I was super excited. I The first time I saw this movie was on DVD. I got it at world famous Opera House Video a few years ago, maybe like 5 or 6, 7 years ago. And again, genre wise, horror is my favorite, but I also am a big science fiction fan. I'm a huge science fiction fan, and I have always said that whenever you have those examples of where movies can fuse, if you will, both those genres together, horror and science fiction, to me it's the greatest thing. Again, science fiction is like a close second. In a lot of ways, it's kind of tied to the horror genre as far as like my deep loves, my deep love for genre film or genre specific kinds of films. But the movie, and again, I only saw this movie once or twice, I think, on DVD, and I was like, this movie is totally awesome. Why don't more people talk about this movie? And then I picked it up when I went to the sale, the sale that I mentioned at Opera House Video last week. They had this on Blu-ray, and that is the 1972 classic Silent Running, starring Bruce Dern. This movie is such a killer movie and so underrated. I never hear people talk about this movie. But I think, science fiction, again, is a massive. I mean, there's a lot of people out there, you know, science fiction films and, books and stories are, it's a massively popular genre. And I'm always surprised that people never talk about this movie. I never hear it really ever come up. I don't think I ever hear this movie mentioned, which I'm really surprised by. Another movie that I think is another film that I think is a classic and isn't really talked about is Outland with Sean Connery, another science fiction film. The thing that's really cool about that movie, and especially Silent Running, is again it's an interesting kind of take on science fiction because the it's definitely science fiction, very futuristic, but it has this very kind of gritty, reality based kind of thing. Nothing is like so like it's not like I'm trying to compare it to. It's not like Star Wars where it doesn't move. Which again, I love Star Wars, but it's not. It's science fiction that is still kind of steeped in reality, and it is grounded. It doesn't cross over into mythology per se or fantasy, but it's all gritty, and it's very much placed in kind of this reality that probably in some ways isn't far off from where we are, and in some ways is kind of happening now. And it has a very. I'm also a big fan of science fiction that is set with the backdrop of like a dystopian age. And this film also has very much that same kind of vibe. But it's such a great movie. I love it's just real gritty. It's such a tight script. Um, it's really original and Bruce Dern, I mean, one of the great actors of his generation. He's like super young when he made this movie too. This is 72. But and again, it came out in the 70s, in my favorite decade. Such a great movie. And the way it's interesting too because the way I discovered this movie, I discovered this movie a long time ago. Oh, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, okay. So I discovered Silent Running quite a few years ago. So there was a movie that very influenced by this movie and I'll get into get into that a little bit more. But there was a movie that came out in 2009 called Moon in 2009. And it was directed by Duncan Jones and it stars Sam Rockwell. And Duncan Jones was or is the son of David Bowie, which is really interesting. Duncan Jones directed this movie and it's called Moon and it's such a cool movie. Again, it's really great. Just a really awesome science fiction movie. I have Moon on I have a really beautiful DVD version of it. I haven't actually seen it in a really, really long time. And again, it has this real gritty, kind of reality based kind of vibe, but very much a science fiction. It moves into some very interesting, kind of, I don't know, spooky territory and hints that there's some kind of otherworldly presence, but really cool movie. And I I bought Moon. I saw it a long time ago. Again, it came out in 2009, and I saw it. I rented it or something, once or twice when it came out, and then I bought a copy of Moon, and I've had it for a super long time actually on DVD. It would be awesome to get an upgrade of Moon on Blu-ray because it really is a visual movie. Music is really great. It just has this amazing atmosphere. It's got this like sense of paranoia. It's kind of a thriller, but it's pure science fiction and it's really great. But there's an interview with Duncan Jones, and there's some really great special features on the disc about the making of Moon. And Duncan Jones talks about, again, he is a really great director. He made a couple other films that were like not so great, but I felt like okay. I haven't really followed his career in a while, but Moon is a pretty amazing film. Anyway, there's an interview with Duncan Jones, and it's just interesting because he's David Bowie's son, and he kind of looks like him too. He was talking about how he came up with the concept for this film Moon because it is I think it was something he created. It was all original. He he wrote I believe he wrote the screenplay and obviously directed the film. Sam Rockwell again one of the truly great actors of his generation. And it's essentially set, where it's basically just there's very little characters. It's basically Sam Rockwell kind of isolated for pretty much the entire film. And so Duncan Jones was talking about, how he came up with the concept, and then he really talked a lot about the films and movies that really inspired him to make Moon. And he was talking about Alien, Ridley Scott's Alien, the masterpiece, and then he really talked a lot about Outland with Sean Connery. And at that time, I had never heard of Outland. I'd never seen it before. I do have Outland. I have a really awesome DVD copy of it, but I do need to get. It would be awesome to get it on Blu-ray because it's such an awesome. It's one of my favorite science fiction movies, and it's similar to Silent Running because no one talks about it. I think nowadays when you see science fiction, a lot of the newer, say, science fiction films that come out, or films that come out now, genre-wise, seem to kind of move more into the fantasy realm. It definitely has, it takes on a very different kind of reality, very heightened reality. Whereas Outland and also especially Silent Running, it's very grounded science fiction. So, a very different kind of a different feel. But I had never seen that movie, and I remember buying it on or renting it. I can't remember how the hell I saw it. Outland with Sean Connery. I think I found it or something, but I bought it on DVD, and it's one of my favorite science fiction movies. It's so damn good. And then so Duncan Jones was talking about his influence. So he was talking about Ridley Scott's Alien being a big influence, and then he said especially movies like Outland with Sean Connery. But then he said probably the biggest influence for him was this movie with Bruce Stern called Silent Running. And so Silent Running and Outland were two films I never had ever heard about. So thanks to that interview, I discovered both of those movies. So pretty amazing. And that's one of the things that I've talked about why I love special features so much is that's a for me is a primetime example of that. Because if I get into a movie and I'm like totally nerding out and I'm like, wanting it, or I end up watching it a bunch of times or get so into it, I kind of want to find out, you know, more about the director and like what inspired the film and all those things. And so that's how I discovered these movies by the special features component because it's basically an interview where Duncan Jones is just being sitting, sitting in a chair and he's just being interviewed and it's a really cool open interview. So, and I remember after hearing about, and this was quite a few years ago because this movie Moon came out in 2009. I think it was a couple of years or two later. I ended up seeing Outland and just blown away by it, and then I bought it on Blu or DVD, which I still have. I knew definitely need to get an upgrade of that film because visually it's amazing, like Silent Running. So I a couple of years or a few years later, I saw that Opera House Video had Silent Running, and I had never seen it, heard it, and I rented it, and I was like, this movie is awesome. Like, why isn't this movie talked about more? And it's a really cool. It's just such an awesome movie because the premise is really interesting. It's basically, it's a it's set way into the future where basically all vegetation and life, the air, the trees, nature basically has like come to an end. All the resources are drained. There's no plant life. Forests are now extinct. It's definitely a dystopian film. So what the film is centered on this crew, these astronauts that are sent into space to basically kind of rejuvenate vegetation. And Bruce Stern plays this astronaut who is in charge of these like giant pods that they have in outer space of where he's growing basically vegetation. He's in charge of these pods that have an entire like forest inside them. It's really cool. Really cool premise. And considering that this movie, is as old as it is from early 70s, it looks great. Like the practical effects are awesome. And so it's basically about his character, where he's essentially a farmer, more or less, and a grower in outer space, and he's growing, all of these. He has all these different projects in space, and there's like a crew of like 5 or 6 astronauts, and he's in charge of growing these like giant, lush kind of forests, and then he has this other area, this other pod that he has of where it's like basically a massive garden, and he's growing all kinds of fresh vegetables and trying to bring. They're trying to basically, since planet Earth has become kind of inhabitable and all vegetation has died, they're trying to kind of salvage that and bring that back. And it's kind of moved into where now people, as consumers, all they're eating and getting and have access to is like completely artificial garbage food, basically, like garbage fast food. So it kind of has an eco horror kind of vibe. It definitely has social commentary on consumerism, also the environment, protecting the environment. And it does have that kind of social issue, at the forefront, but it's not like preachy, it's not heavy-handed. And again, it's something that is very realistic in a lot of ways. So And it's interesting because Bruce Dern's character is like hell bent on preserving this way of life and bringing back vegetation and forest and clean air and trees and vegetables. And there's like this rift that kind of develops between him and the other astronauts because they are all like feel like, well, it's over. There's no way of bringing this back. Why are we putting all of this money into it? Why are we doing all this research? It's, we can't. This isn't sustainable, basically. So there's like this infighting that happens between him, his character, Bruce Dern's character, and the rest of the astronauts. And so they're out in space on this mission for quite a few years. But then the space program that's in charge of it decides to pull the plug on on this experiment, and so they decide to kind of blow up these pods, and basically all the work that Bruce Dern has been working on, they basically destroy it, and so and he becomes like really radicalized and just really protective, and so he decides to kind of stop this from happening, and a series of events happen and all of the other crew members get killed, and then it's basically just him in space trying to survive on this one pod, or in this one pod, and it's such an awesome movie. It's really really great. Such an original movie. Again, 72, the practical effects are just killer. It's all set design, really cool premise. It's got a lot of suspense. Very dystopian, which I'm all about. And and I watched this. I watched Silent Running the other night on Blu-ray. And the transfer is amazing. There's a lot of great special features on here. There's some interviews with Bruce Dern, the director of the film, the cast. It's really, really great. Really, really, it looks beautiful on Blu-ray, I have to say. This is, if you're a fan of science fiction, I think this movie and Outland are essential movies that, a lot of people talk about Soylent Green as like a classic science fiction movie with Charlton Heston, and it is. That's a really great film, and that came out in the late '60s. But that movie's way more talked about than these movies, and especially Silent Running. And this movie is right up there with Soylent Green, and a lot of great the Omega Man too, with Vincent Price or Charlton Heston as well. Another great classic science fiction movie, which eventually got remade into I Am Legend with Will Smith. But super super cool movie, really great, and the transfer of Silent Running onto Blu-ray just looks spectacular. So can't recommend this movie enough. Classic science fiction. Bruce Dern at its best. Peace.